for some of you who have worked with A Course in Miracles, like I have, I went through that book, and when I was reading the book, I was paying close attention, and I would oftentimes just stop when I come to a certain paragraph or a certain sentence and just really take time to really take it in. Like, wow, what is the impact? What are the ramifications of this that I'm reading, these ideas that I'm reading? Some of you who have read the Course, when you get back into the Manual for Teachers, I was just glancing again this morning at the Manual for Teachers at the back of A Course in Miracles, and I came upon that section, what are the characteristics of God's teachers? And the very first one is trust. And he says this is the foundation on which their ability to fulfill their function rests. Fulfill their function. If our only function is to forgive illusions, to expose darkness, to raise the darkness to the light, to release limiting beliefs, egoic beliefs, so that our mind may be returned to that glorious awareness of having no limits, of being a perfect creation of a loving God, then He's even given us stages that we will go through. Some of you are probably quite familiar. I was very interested. The first time I went through that section, my eyes were all popped out, and I was like taking in every sentence. Oh my gosh, the stages of the development of trust. Oh my gosh, how many are there? 6! Okay, wow, 6 stages. And then as I read through them, I have to say my initial reaction was, oh my gosh, 4 of the 6 are conflictual, challenging, unsettling, uncomfortable. I thought, wow, if you judge the level, the stages of development of trust that you have to do to wake up from this dark dream of separation and death, that even the unwinding from the belief in separation, 4 of the 6 are I would say, somewhat dark. And so I like it when the way shower gives you a roadmap, but also says, listen, I'm going to be realistic with you. You've wound yourself into a very dark dream. He says, I know because I was there too, and I had to learn to listen to one voice in my mind, and I had to learn to listen and follow the Holy Spirit to unwind myself from this dark dream. But 4 of the 6 stages that you're going to go through are going to be quite difficult. And then I looked at those and I thought, well, at least when you get towards the end, I think it's 4 and 6, there's a period of rest and respite, a very restful period there in stage 4, and then 6, when you reach your achievement, when you reach your self-realization, when you reach your experience of transfer of training and truly forgiving all things that are perceived through the 5 senses, then you start to tap into this happiness and this peace and this joy in a very consistent way. Of course, the final stage is going to be the breakthrough stage, but that would be the stage that would be the equivalent of being under Christ's control. That's the stage where you're just beholding the world. You're beholding the world in all of its loveliness. A world without judgment. A world without differences. A unified world. A harmonious world. What's not to like about a unified, harmonious world? If you've ever thought of heaven on earth, or the most heavenly state that you could experience, then that's the final stage. It's called a period of achievement in the Manual for Teachers. But in order to come to that, it will take faith, because the things that you trusted in before, your learning, the learning of the world, we all have had education We all have had upbringing. We all have had conditioning. And all of this education and upbringing and conditioning, the majority of it, I would say the vast majority of it, has been part of a blockage or a hindrance of knowing who we truly are. So, at one point in the Course in Miracles, Jesus says, "You've been poorly taught." Okay, that's pretty direct. I've been poorly taught. Another point, he says, "Resign now as your own teacher." You've been teaching and learning a lot here, and it's not been going well. You have not found the freedom that you had hoped for. You had not found that happiness that you had longed for. Your teaching and learning was very limited because it was guided by the ego. You might say in the kingdom of heaven or perfect oneness in nirvana, there is no teaching and there is no learning, there is no need, there is no change in the kingdom of heaven. Everything is constantly light, constantly joy and love and happiness. So learning is part of an ego invention, and as with everything that the ego invented, the Holy Spirit uses it. So the Holy Spirit is not going to destroy the ego's thought system, because the ego's thought system was believed in by a very powerful mind, the Holy Son of God, and love and light and God, eternity, doesn't even know of destruction. So it's not like, oh, there's an invader, intrusion alert, our beloved sonship has been invaded by a dark force called the ego. Red alert. Get the angels, get the swarms of angels, the legions of angels to get out there. No, the angels are not a war machine. The angels are just symbols of the Holy Spirit's correction, and God won't destroy what the ego made because God doesn't know of destruction. So what do we get? If the ego is not going to be destroyed, and yet it seems to be a death wish, how do you deal with something that's a death wish without destroying it? I know in all of our movies, Star Wars, it's like trying to kill the enemy, kill Darth Vader, or kill the evil one, eradicate, eliminate, destroy. But God doesn't know of destruction, so the most we can say of what love and light does with the Holy Spirit, with the ego or the death wish, is it's called reinterpretation. That's as harsh as God can go. I mean, God, pure love, doesn't even know of error, so the Holy Spirit, which is just a corrective extension for what God doesn't understand separation. God could never understand separation because God creates in wholeness. Spirit creates spirit creates spirit. Spirit doesn't even understand separation. But the Holy Spirit, that corrective aspect, has one function, and that is reinterpretation. So if you're looking for a knight in shining armor, that knight in shining armor to save the day is reinterpretation. That's all that we're being asked to do, is allow our minds to go through a reinterpretation of the world. It was interpreted through a filter of hatred. It was made out of hate. It's been interpreted through hatred, and we've been playing this game of attack and defense, and protect the body, and protect our children, and protect our houses, protect our country. We've been trying to be so protective of certain symbols, and every culture is protective of their country, of their families, of their land, of their homes, of course. But all of that is a projection of the ego, because all of it is a game of attack and defense, and it all involves illusions. And illusions do not need to be protected or defended in any way, shape, or form. As long as our mind is sleeping and identified with these false images, then what it is in need of is reinterpretation. You could call it correction, you can call it reinterpretation. Now, some of us were raised with, Christian symbols, and we had symbols like salvation. I know going to Bible school and reading the Bible and growing up as a Christian, there was some aspects of Christianity that were quite terrifying, like Last Judgment, as if somehow God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit were going to be involved in some kind of last judgment, and it wasn't pretty. The good ones get taken up, and the bad ones get burned in the fire. It wasn't something growing up as a child that you were like, oh, that sounds sweet. You didn't say it sounded sweet when some are taken up and some are burned, or some are taken up to go back to heaven, and others as if they're burned for their punishment for their evil ways and everything. That is still so dualistic. All the stories that most all of us were raised with are so dualistic. Always good versus evil, and good and the bad, and even with God, and even with Jesus, He'll come back, His second coming, He's going to come on a white horse. That sounds cool. Coming in over the clouds on a white horse, but, He's going to take the good ones up with Him, and He's going to, the rest are just going to perish. That's worse than the Santa Claus story. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. At least Santa Claus was dualistic, but it didn't have like burning people that were perishing. There was none of that in the whole Santa Claus story. So for me, once you come to a point and you start to realize that the solution is going to be a reinterpretation in your mind, then you have just taken a quantum leap in your spiritual journey to just come to the admission that all your mind needs is a corrective reinterpretation. And actually, it's really just a tweak, because love is so amazing and so beautiful and everything, and distortions it's like a little tweak. Joel Goldsmith, I think, used to call this world as like a parenthesis in eternity. It's just this little tiny tweak of a correction where you, for a moment, have one of these moments where you go, oops. You have an oops moment where you realize you had misinvested your mind. You had put your great mind energy and your mind's attention in the wrong direction, and then you have this oops moment. Oops, I made a mistake. And then you open up, and this amazing heavenly correction comes in, and you are just so happy and so relieved and so grateful that it was just one little tweak, this tweak of believing in time and space, this little tiny little tweak of identifying with the body and being a person. And it's not some big kind of monumental thing, it's the tiniest little tweak. And it's also the simplest thing that you could ever do. If illusions are illusions, how difficult can it be to turn around and accept the truth? If illusions are just misperceptions of reality, if illusions are just misperceptions of identity, and if they have no actual validity whatsoever, it cannot be difficult to accept yourself as the Christ. It must be easier to accept yourself as you really are than to try to pretend you're something else that you're not. It has to be easier. Reality must be a lot easier than what we're going through, what we're experiencing in time and space. I remember back in the